Texas and enters rooms like this all the time, people that I don't recognize. It's always such a pleasure to see somebody from back home. And I come into this room today and I see Jolene Reynolds standing there and say, gee whiz, am I in Harris County? But she's been here for 5 years, and as I understand it, she's one of the founding members of this club. And as her time back in Houston, she was an activist. And thank you so much for caring enough about our republic and future generations to spend your life dedicated to these principles. It's an honor to be here, ladies and gentlemen. I am John Devine, running for Texas Supreme Court Place 4. In the Texas Supreme Court, we rotate every 2 years. 3 judges run for re-election for 6-year terms. In this case, this is Place 4. Let me tell you a little bit about myself personally. Before I got involved in politics, I spent my initial career with Shell Oil Company, where I worked on projects around the world, developing oil and gas fields, building facilities, managing people, and spending a lot of money for Shell, developing its infrastructure. After about 7 years of doing that, and during that time I went to law school at night. And so after work, I would drive about 40 miles downtown, and I would attend law school. And I did that for 5 years. And thank God for that, because it kept me out of trouble. After my time at Shell, I went to Brown & Root. And again, on an international basis, I built power plants and roads and various other manufacturing facilities, petrochemical plants and so forth, managed a lot of people, spent a lot of money developing jobs in the United States and abroad, depending on where a facility was built. So I have an interesting perspective upon government. I think government ought to serve the people. I think government ought to be accountable to the people, both financially and otherwise. And so coming from a business background, and I say that and I emphasize that because most folks that wind up as judges come out of law firms. And that's fine, but my experience and background is just a little different and unique. Now, I was elected as district judge in Harris County back in 1995, and I served for nearly 8 years. I was then appointed a special judge, and by that I mean, that's just the title, special judge, but I would sit in for other judges, and I did that for a period of nearly 10 years. Just to keep my hands in the judicial circuit, I still practice law and so forth. During this time, I served on a number of judicial boards where we would create policy for the judiciary, whether that was a torts docket or mass torts docket, or for national and state judicial organizations, again, where we developed policy that we would apply to state and federal courts, mainly state courts. A lot of our ideas came from the federal system. Personally, I've been married for 22 years. I have 7 children. One's in heaven. In fact, my wife right now, I left her right after the convention. Was there anybody here that went to the convention? Good. I went to the convention, and we had a great time. And from there, we went up to Colorado. I dropped my wife off, and I had to come back here, came back to Houston, changed my clothes, and I'm here today. And shaved. Ladies and gentlemen, what you need to look at in your judges is integrity. There is no expiration date on integrity for judges. The basic foundation of a judge is trust. We have to have your trust. We have to have proven conservative application of the law. One case I handled in Harris County was when Mayor Brown, a Democratic mayor, wanted to jam down the throats of the citizens of Houston a light rail metro line to the tune of nearly $1 billion. They were going to confiscate personal property, private property, for right-of-way, and not give the people the right to vote. I stood in the way, granted an injunction, and I gave the people the right to vote. You need that kind of dedication. And I paid a political price for that, because you can imagine there's a lot of people who are interested in getting that $1 billion. And the Houston Chronicle and the liberal newspapers around there just crucified me. But I did the right thing. I don't apologize for it. And I want to take those same conservative values to Austin with me, with your permission. God bless you.
Elizabeth Alvarez. Hi, my name is Elizabeth Alvarez. I'm an attorney here in DFW. I'm here to speak for Justice Medina. He currently holds place 4 on the Texas Supreme Court, and he would love to have been with you here today, but the court is actually in session, and that's why he wasn't able to make it. But I know he's really grateful that you allowed me to speak for him, and I also appreciate your having me. Justice Medina is one of the most qualified conservative justices that the state of Texas has, and in my humble opinion, the state of Texas would be extremely blessed to take him up on his offer to serve them for a little bit longer. The Supreme Court of Texas, you know, it's our highest civil court, and Justice Medina was appointed to that court in 2004 by Governor Rick Perry, and he was elected again by the voters to a 6-year full term in 2006, and he's running for a 2nd term now. The Texas Supreme Court, they're charged with upholding our state's civil laws, and Justice Medina does a really good job of upholding those the way conservative Texans would like them to be. He's strongly supported by all kinds of pro-life, pro-business, pro-property rights groups. Way back, if you're talking about someone, let me just say this. It is true that you need to have integrity when you're looking for a judge, but there are a lot of people with integrity who are not qualified to sit on the state Supreme Court and hear cases that are extremely complex, about extremely complex issues, and interpret the law the way the state of Texas has voted. State of Texas, you guys vote. You choose your legislatures, they make the law, the justices interpret it. You need someone with integrity and the knowledge to understand complex litigation and who has a proven record of interpreting laws the way that Texas likes to have them interpreted, with a conservative background and judicial restraint. Way back when Phil Gramm and Rick Perry were still Democrats, Justice Medina was serving as a Republican precinct chair when he was in law school. He worked his way full-time through law school. He went to law school at night, and he worked, after he graduated, he worked as an in-house litigator for 2 major Texas companies that protect property rights and private sector rights, and in 1996, then Governor George W. Bush appointed him as the presiding judge of the 157th District State Court, and in 1998 he was elected by the voters to a full term on the bench, making him the first Hispanic Republican judge in Harris County. After that, he returned back to the private sector. So we're not talking about a man who seeks political office just to seek political office. When he was asked by the governor to step in and take the place in place 4, he took the appointment, and the voters chose again to have him. He's been endorsed by the Texas Right to Life, the Texas Alliance for Life, the Association of Realtors, Apartment Association, the Texas Farm Bureau, Homeschool Coalition. He's been endorsed by Greg Abbott, former Chief Justice Tom Phillips, members of the Texas Congressional Delegation, John Culberson and Kiko Canseco. He's been endorsed by Senator Jane Nelson, Dan Patrick, Joan Huffman, numerous state representatives like Dan Branch, and many other organizations and elected leaders. There are always going to be people telling you in these kinds of races, people you've never heard of before, telling you to vote for somebody because they best represent their interests. You need to listen to the people who have proven records that you already know and trust, like Greg Abbott. And you need to look at people who have records of defending your rights and knowing the way to protect Texas and its laws. That's why we ask you to choose Justice Medina for another term.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I have a question for both of you. This has to do with the conservative versus liberal. There are some people that say, well, why do we need Republican judges and Democratic or justices and Democrat justices? So the question reads, can you give an example? And I think you touched upon that in giving an example, but we want another example of a case whereby a conservative, we'll say a Republican, but certainly a conservative justice would reflect his or her values different from the way a liberal justice would. And you can use a fictitious case or something that you remember in your past or in your experience, Mrs. Alvarez, whatever. So Why don't we start with you this time, Mrs. Alvarez?
Absolutely. You know, there was a California real estate company here in Texas who tried to restrict what we call the Open Beaches Act, and that's the right of the state of Texas, of your citizens to have open access to public beach property. Whenever you have, there are laws on the books, and the justices use stare decisis, they use laws that already exist, and they do interpret the laws, but there's always going to be a fundamental difference in judicial philosophy about the role of government, the role of the rule of law, and that's where you start to see the difference between truly conservative and truly liberal justices. Now, Justice Medina was one of the 3 Supreme Court justices who voted to uphold the rights of private property owners in the state of Texans to have access to the open beaches and to protect the Open Beaches Act from a suing real estate company from California. He's also have on record many times on the state Supreme Court as voting for he's pro Second Amendment. He's voted to protect the rights of Texans to bear arms multiple times. Those are just, you can look up on his website, there's a list of cases all about the various times he's voted for issues that liberal justices just don't see the law the same way that a conservative justice does.
Thank you. Thank you. And John Devine?
Yes, thank you. Let me first lay the predicate on my judicial philosophy, because I think that is a context that you can apply to almost any given situation. I'm a constitutional constructionist. That is, I believe the Constitution says what it means and means what it says. We don't need the UN to tell us. We don't need a bunch of fancy special interest groups to tell us. We have to follow the law as it's put forth by the Texas legislature. It's real simple. It's not any more complicated than that. Although there are some in the judiciary that like to be what we call judicial activists. And they see things that the rest of us don't see. They see emanations from penumbras and all. That's how we came up with Roe v. Wade and so forth. I'm not clairvoyant, so I look at it in black and white, and I try my best to follow the intent of the legislature. Now, on a number of occasions, I've found myself a defendant. As a district judge in Harris County, I was sued by the ACLU and the gay atheists for having the 10 Commandments in my courtroom. Now, I fought that case all the way through to the United States Fifth Circuit, and I believe that the values set forth in the 10 Commandments are necessary for the freedom that we enjoy in this republic. We have to have restraints on ourselves, ladies and gentlemen. We have to have restraints on government. Otherwise, we wind up with an Obama, where there are no restraints, there are no respect for the Constitution, and we have chaos and anarchy. And we have a man who has 43 czars that are basically running the country, similar to the Politburo. So it's very important that we have judges that adhere strictly to the Constitution. I was also sued because I had the Bible in front of the courthouse. Now, for 150 years in this state, people put their hand on the Bible and took an oath. They did that because they had to appeal to a higher authority so that the people would trust them and that they knew that they were accountable to a higher God. Ladies and gentlemen, I think if you'll look at our records, if you will Google us, if you will do your research, if you will do your due diligence, and don't take it for granted, I think you will come to a just decision in this particular and very important race.
Thank you. Thank you both very much.